Happy New Year, everybody! Jeremy and I are excited to bring you our first episode of 2018. And what better way to start the year than with Louisa May Alcott's timeless classic, Little Women? We discovered that this book has inspired both some lovely adaptations and some real weird ones. Which was which, you'll have to listen to find out. I also want to let you know the topic of our next episode, for those of you who are reading along at home. We read Alison Bechdel's comic book memoir, Fun Home, and went to see the 2015 musical based on that work. If Fun Home doesn't happen to be touring through your town, you can find clips on YouTube and the cast album wherever you download or stream music. But for now, let's travel to 1868 in Concord, Massachusetts for a visit with Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy March. Won't you join us as Adapter Parish presents Little Women?
Welcome to Adapter Parish, the podcast about adaptation. My name is Jeremy Latour.
I'm Arielle Lipshaw.
Welcome this week. We are going to be talking about a little book called
Little Women.
Hi, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well.
Excellent.
I finished this book today.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
You did. But to be fair, you have before finishing the book, watched a lot of adaptations and also had some enrichment experiences.
Enrichment experiences?
Yeah. So for this episode, we looked at Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, which is a book that was published in
1868, I believe.
1868. And we watched, let me see, we watched 3 movies, 1 TV show, which we'll get to in a second.
A TV special.
A television spectacular. Read the book, but we also took a field trip.
Oh yeah, we did a field trip for this one.
Yeah. So we'll get into that. So let's start out. What is Little Women?
So Little Women, do you want me to explain it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so Little Women is a book that is beloved by people all across the world.
Now, of what gender are most of those people?
I think most of them are ladies.
Ladies.
Yeah.
Like mostly ladies. Because let me ask you this. Had you ever read this book before?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
Right. I had read this book.
Yeah.
Many a time.
How would you say this ranks for you as in your favorite books?
Top 5.
Top 5?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It is my experience with it. Well, we'll get into what my experience with it was.
Let's talk about what it is first.
Yeah. I mean, basically, it's the story about 4 sisters growing up in Concord, Massachusetts during the Civil War. Mm-hmm. And it's very episodic.
Yes.
It's about, what would you say? It's like 15 years?
Yeah, like skips forward in time. Yes, by the time it ends, it is 15. There's sort of an epilogue.
Yeah.
So by the time we get to the epilogue, it is exactly 15 years after it started.
Exactly. So that's kind of the book. I would say that's the simple version of it.
It's the story of 4 sisters and their lives and loves.
Right.
Right.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah. But we learned a little bit about how this book was written that was really interesting because we actually happen to live about 15 minutes from Orchard House, which is where the author, Louisa May Alcott, wrote this book. And it is a historical museum, and you can go and see like the room where she wrote it, the room where it happened, and good. Good job.
Yeah, it's a good joke. That's a good reference.
Good reference?
Yep.
Thanks, babe. And they tell you all about sort of what went into writing this novel and how the novel mirrored her life, because it's, while fictionalized, it's extremely autobiographical, especially the first half.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So there are 4 sisters living in Concord, Massachusetts, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy.
In order of their ages.
Oldest
to youngest.
And their father has gone off to war.
Their father has gone to army.
Yep. To be a preacher, a clergy for the army. And they are very, very poor. And their mother...
Poor in money,
but rich in
spirit.
Rich in love.
Oh, very rich in spirit.
Yeah. And their mother is doing the best she can. And essentially...
Can I say one thing about the mom that I didn't understand?
Yeah, go ahead.
I always knew she was Marmee.
Yeah.
Like, that's just Mommy.
Yeah, it's Mommy with a New England accent. So you can, if you just say it like Mommy, Mommy,
right?
Like, that's how they would have said it.
Exactly.
And the point at which I realized that that's what was happening was when I heard Katharine Hepburn say Marmee, because she just said it Mommy, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. Anyway,
I want to know something.
Yes, go ahead.
What do you like about this book?
I like the relationships between the sisters very much. I also really see myself kind of in all four of them, so it's kind of interesting because all four of them have very different personalities. They're different types of people, and so depending on what mood you're in or sort of what point in your life you are when you read this book, I think there's sort of something for everybody. I think young girls probably tend to see themselves as Jo, like they really want to be successful and they feel different and they want something more, but they can't quite verbalize what it is. But sort of as you get older and further along in life and like are more interested in maybe settling down or having a family, then I feel like you really start to identify with Meg or even with Marmee, about, sort of motherhood and finding a person who loves you and all of this stuff. And it's just, it has a very happy ending. Everybody ends happily, except for one person.
Except, almost everyone.
Almost everyone. Well, she meets her fate with good spirit.
I mean, it's the 1860s, so if anyone gets sick,
right,
they're not long for this world.
That's the end. So let me ask you something.
Yeah.
I feel like we haven't really talked much about the plot, and that's probably because, like you said, the book is really episodic. So to describe the plot would really just kind of be to describe a chapter by chapter, and that would take a long time.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. First of all, as a 34-year-old man reading Little Women for the first time, did you like this book?
No.
Okay.
And then I did.
Okay.
I didn't like it, and then I liked it.
Well, maybe that's a good starting point. Do you want to talk about why that is?
Okay, so the book, for those of our listeners who haven't read the book, it really is split into two halves. This is all stuff that I didn't know. I was not really aware of the structure of Little Women. I had seen, before we went through all this, I had watched the 1994 version with you. We watched it like a year or two ago.
Yeah.
And I liked it.
Yeah,
I liked it.
We'll talk about it later.
Yeah, it didn't really hit me at that point. So this was my first opportunity kind of to read the book, and I didn't realize how much it really is split into two halves. So you see them when they're in their teens, and then you see them when they're like turning 20.
Yeah, and then follow them sort of for a couple of years in their 20s.
And one of the things about the book, because so many books were written this way at the time, it was really, it wasn't released as one book.
Right.
It was released as two books.
Right.
And Louisa May Alcott really had one specific way she wanted to write the first half. Or she had one specific way she wanted to write it.
Yeah.
And then got feedback after it came out and changed the way she was writing it. And I really liked the feedback that she got because I liked the second half so much more than I liked the first half.
Yeah.
So much more.
Yeah, and why? Why would you say?
So the first half is, I want to say this, I want to be delicate about this.
Okay.
The first half is a series of morality tales.
It is. I mean, it's based on Pilgrim's Progress, which they even talk about in the book itself. Which is, I haven't really read Pilgrim's Progress, but like it's all about like it's a sort of an allegorical morality tale, and it's all about like conquering your personal vices to be a better person.
Right. It was written in like the 1600s.
Oh yeah, like a long time ago. So
I actually tried to read it for this.
Oh, did you?
I didn't tell you that.
Oh no.
Yeah, I downloaded it and I tried to read it and I got about half a page into it.
Well, all the characters are named like Envy and Sloth. Like they're not like people. They're vices. And it's about sort of overcoming your personal vices and improving yourself. So each chapter is kind of an allegory about someone doing just that and coming out on the other side being a better person. It's definitely, so when we talk, this is an interesting contrast. So when we talked about Anne of Green Gables, we talked about how the characters in the book often told other characters what they should do, but you never got the sense that the author was telling the reader what they should do.
Right.
In this case, I often felt that the author was instructing the reader through the guise of these characters as to how to be a good person.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the reason I didn't like it.
Right,
is because
exactly.
the entire first half of the book is basically the author telling me this is what I should do to be a good person.
Right.
And I don't appreciate that. I'm fine. I get it.
You also don't live in 1868, so
Yeah,
like
stuff's a little
times
different
have
now.
changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very, because there was that aspect of the book that kind of set up I'd say a barrier between me and the author. Every time something happened that was really out of place for the time period that we live in, it really stuck out.
Yeah.
And I really kind of hooked onto it. So anytime she's talking about the relationship between men and women and what men are like and what women are like, every time
And what women should want.
Oh my God. And every time she does that, I'm just thinking to myself, it's the 1860s. It's the 1860s. She doesn't understand. She doesn't understand what things are like today.
Right.
But then in the second half of the book, it really just becomes a story about people.
Right.
And it just becomes about their lives at that point. And they're not always the best people. They make mistakes.
Right.
And everything isn't always wrapped up by the end of the chapter.
Right. They misunderstand each other and things don't get neatly tied into a bow necessarily, like relationships between people sometimes fracture and don't get mended again. And people die.
Yeah.
Like, right?
Well,
a
person dies.
A people.
Yeah.
A single people.
Yeah. No, I found the second half unexpected and subversive and much more, just bottom line, much more interesting than the first half.
I mean, I kind of disagree with she got feedback on the story she wanted to write and then changed it. I didn't get that that's what they were saying when we took the tour of Orchard House. I kind of got the feeling that she wrote a book that she thought would sell, and because people were clamoring for more, she then could write a book that the second half maybe wouldn't have sold before the first half. Do you know what I mean?
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And I think the way I said it was probably less accurate than what you're talking about.
Right.
It was the book she thought she needed to write. She wrote it the way she thought she needed to write it.
Right. But the thing that she did change that we learned was that she never intended for Joe to get married. She intended for Joe to be a happy spinster. And show that, and I think kind of revolutionarily, her intention, because she, the author, Louisa May Alcott, never married.
Right.
And her intention was to show that a woman could be happy and fulfilled without being married.
Mm-hmm.
And this apparently was unacceptable, so she was forced to marry Joe off, but she refused to marry Joe to Laurie, who is like the obvious choice. So Laurie and Joe
Laurie is their next door neighbor.
Laurie is their next door neighbor.
He grew up with them. He's very handsome.
He's very rich.
Yeah.
His family's very rich. And like the intention was everybody wanted Joe to marry Laurie, and she said no. Joe's gonna make a funny marriage.
Yeah.
So she ends up marrying somebody else, and Laurie marries Amy, the youngest sister.
Right. And then the guy she ends up marrying is like 20 years older than her, and he's not particularly handsome.
But he's a kind heart.
But he's a great person.
He's a good person.
He's a great person. She informs us many times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we talk about some of the characters really quickly and then move on to the adaptations?
Yeah, let's go through it.
Okay, so there's 4 sisters, most importantly. Meg is the oldest. She is kind.
Yeah.
And very proper, very invested in being proper.
She's very safe.
She's very safe.
She's not very adventurous.
No, and she's definitely, of the 4 of them, she is the most traditional. She wants to get married. She wants to have babies. She wants to be like a housewife.
Right.
And she has the most conventional expectations for her life for the time, but she's very sweet and very good and a very good person.
Yeah.
All right, so I did Meg, so you described Joe.
Okay, so Joe is a tomboy, and she's active, and she's not proper, and she's incredibly creative, and she's a writer, and she's adventurous, and has a temper. Would you agree with all of those?
Yes, I agree with all those, and I just want to point out, because I'm not sure I explicitly mentioned it, Louisa May Alcott had 3 sisters, and each one of these sisters is based on one of those sisters. So Meg is her oldest sister, Anna. She herself is Jo. The third sister, Beth, was another sister whose name was actually Beth. And then the youngest sister, Amy, was May. Her sister May. Get it?
Right.
Amy, May.
Oh my God, I get it.
And also their last name was May.
Not March.
And March, see, like they're both months.
No, oh my goodness.
Get it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so the third sister...
Let's not downplay the amount of creativity that had to go into this book.
I think it's great.
No, she's wonderful. She's great.
I think it's great.
Yeah, she's one of the giants.
So the third sister is Beth. She is painfully shy. She's very musical. She loves to play the piano. She loves her dolls. She likes helping out in the kitchen. She likes helping the poor.
She's sweet.
She's just sweet and very, very loving to everyone. She doesn't really have any faults other than being extremely shy. And then there's Amy.
Right. Amy has faults.
Yes.
Amy is vain. She wants to be rich. So one thing I will say about Amy is that Amy is the youngest one.
Right. So at the beginning of the book, she is literally a child.
She's 12 years old when the book begins.
Yes.
And she acts like a 12-year-old. So she's immature. And that's fine because she's 12.
Yes.
And, we've said in the past, we want to get better at saying, we'll get into this.
Right.
We will specifically get into the whole idea of Amy's immaturity later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those are the four sisters. Oh, and she's an artist. That's also very important. Amy is an artist, and she was actually based on Louisa May Alcott's sister, May Alcott, who was actually a very famous artist in her time. And her work was displayed in Europe, and she actually married a European. She had a very sort of dashing husband, and then she unfortunately died soon after her first child was born. And those are the four sisters. So there's also Marmee. Marmee is their mother. Marmee is very wise, very sweet, always knows the right thing to say. But she is based on the real mother, Abigail Alcott, or Abba Alcott, who was the first social worker in Massachusetts. And she's just like the perfect mother. Would you agree with that?
Well,
she's
yes.
meant to represent the perfect mother.
You definitely get the sense that she is what Louisa May Alcott believes the perfect mother to be. Yeah. Which, again, is what we got back to, is that so much of this book is clearly from her perspective.
Right.
She is telling you, this is what a happy family is like.
Right.
This is what good people are like. This is what the best mother is like.
Right. And the thing that Marmee does as a mother that I actually think is really modern, and I imagine was revolutionary at the time, is she treats all of her daughters like different people. She clearly knows that the right thing for one daughter is not necessarily the right thing for another daughter, because they're all individuals and they all have distinct personalities and they want different things. So she might be advising Meg about getting married, but she wouldn't have that same conversation with Joe because she knows that's not the right thing for Joe at that point in her life.
Sure.
And we learned, actually, that the Alcott family was very much like that they actually really supported all of their daughters in the pursuits that they wanted to do. Like, the dad built an art studio for May, or built a writing desk for Louisa. And I think that was really unusual for the time. We learned that
they were super progressive.
The Alcott family was super progressive. He was sort of a visionary teacher. He was an educator. And we'll get into it more, sort of, we can drop in things like that as we go along. But
one thing I'll say is that I think we're going to get into a lot of this again when we talk about the 94 version.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I will say, I'm just going to say it right now, it was my favorite version of it.
Oh my God, by far.
Oh, by far.
Yeah.
So there's so many other characters, and I think they're going to come up as we're talking about it.
I just wanted to give kind of a background so people would know who we were talking about.
But bottom line, it's Civil War, Four Sisters. It's this American classic, beloved. It was made into there was a British silent movie that was made in the teens, and then there was an American silent movie. But then in 1933, there was a major film version.
Well, let me pause before we get into the individual film versions, because I want to say something about all of these movies as adaptations.
Go for it.
I want to talk about age.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we watched 3 movie versions. And I also grabbed information from a 1978 TV miniseries that we did not watch.
We watched a little bit of it.
We watched a little bit of it. Jeremy really liked it because William Shatner's in it.
We'll talk about it.
But I just want to talk about the age of the actresses playing the 4 sisters.
Mm-hmm.
So at the beginning of the book, Here are the ages. We are explicitly given the ages of the characters in the text. Meg is 16. Joe is 15. Beth is 13. Amy is 12. Okay?
I'm on board.
Just keep that in mind. They are teenage girls, 12 to 16. Okay. So we watched 4 versions. 1933, 1949. We didn't watch 1978, but I grabbed that information, and then 1994. Of the 4 versions, the average age of the 4 actresses are, I'm going to go from lowest to highest, 20, 21, 23, and 25.5.
That's very old.
So it's very old. The 1933 version, and I will say the only one where the ages of the actresses playing the sisters actually aligned in the right order to the ages of the characters was the 1994 Winona Ryder version. So in that we have 12, 15, 23, and 27.
Which is fine.
Playing 12, 13, 15, and 16.
Because you can have, it's fine.
Yeah. The 1933 version, Amy, who is 12, was 23.
Yep.
She was also pregnant, extremely pregnant.
Sometimes, yeah.
During the filming. So Beth was 18, fine. Joe, 26, but also Katharine Hepburn, so 26 looks about 40.
Yeah.
And Meg, 24, okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah, Katharine Hepburn projects an experience of life that most people don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
1949, Amy, 17, also Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah.
Beth, 12,
But I think
in that version, Beth was the youngest.
Right,
They didn't
they did
explicitly
change that.
ever say so, but they definitely changed it. Because the actress who played Jo, and this is my favorite, June Allison, was 32, playing a 16-year-old character, and oh boy, does she look 32.
Well, the best part is in the book, when you get to the end, Jo kind of describes herself. She says, I'm old and I'm graying and I'm thin.
30.
I'm 30.
Yeah. Because, having babies back then really took
a lot out of you. It really did take a lot out of you.
And Meg was 22. Meg was also Janet Leigh.
Yeah.
1994, like I said, 12, 15, 23, 27. The thing they did in the 1994 version that none of the other versions did, which is so smart, is they had 2 actresses playing Amy. So when you skipped over years, you didn't have to cast someone who looked 20 as a 12-year-old because they had a different actress playing her at 20 who was 24.
Revolutionary.
Amazing.
Absolutely revolutionary.
And the 1978 one, it's just ridiculous. Amy's 25, Beth is 20, Joe is 26, and Meg is 31.
Okay. So June Allison in the 1949 one is definitely the oldest person of all of these to play any of the daughters.
That is correct.
At 32 years old.
And the funny thing is, had she not been 32, that would certainly have been the lowest average age, because the average, even with her as 32, is only 21, but she pulled it up so much, 17, 12, 22, and 18 would have been great. But she was 32. Okay. So that's what I have to say. The reason that
This will come up more.
The reason that I'm spending so much time on this is, especially with the 2 really old versions, the 1933 and the 1949, it was something that you could not get away from when you were watching these movies. It was impossible to have any suspension of disbelief that these characters were the ages they were supposed to be.
Well, and there's a really bad implication that happened. Well, let's get to it.
Okay, go ahead.
So let's talk about 1933.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in 1933, RKO Pictures made Little Women. George Cukor directed it. It was written by Sarah Y. Mason and Victor Heerman.
It was written by a lady.
Written by a lady. Co-written by a lady.
I like that.
Yeah, so we had Katharine Hepburn as Jo. I'm going to bring everything up right here. So you had Katharine Hepburn as Jo, Frances Dee as Meg, Jean Parker as Beth, Joan Bennett as Amy, Paul Lucas as Professor Bear, and Douglas Montgomery as Laurie. Those are some of the main people.
26 years old, by the way.
26 years old as a 15-year-old boy.
Correct.
Yeah, which doesn't work.
By the way, the Lauries across those versions were 26, 26, 28, and 20. Christian Bale was only 20.
Right. Yeah. In fact, well, I'll wait till we get to it.
Yeah.
So that's the 1933 version. So you had Katharine Hepburn. Of all the people who were in it, Katharine Hepburn she's the one that everyone remembers.
Right.
Because she is the biggest person in the entire cast.
Right.
And she was young. This was one of her first movies.
She was 26.
Yeah.
So not 18.
Young for Katharine Hepburn.
Katharine Hepburn was ever Katharine Hepburn young?
In this movie,
Yeah.
I would say if anyone is a fan of Katharine Hepburn, but they haven't watched some of her earlier works, watch this one.
Yeah.
Because she's great in it. She is Katharine Hepburn.
Is Katharine Hepburn. She was great. She really physically matches the description of Joe in a way that, like, Joe's supposed to be kind of tall and gangly.
Yeah.
And most of the Joes that we saw were teeny tiny.
Mm-hmm.
But she is Katharine Hepburn. Like,
Right.
She's not 15.
She's not 15, but I would watch Katharine Hepburn read the phone book.
Yeah, no, she's great. She's
Yeah.
Katharine Hepburn. What are you gonna do?
So let me. What did you think of the 19th? Had you seen it already?
Oh yeah, I had seen this. We had this on VHS tape when I was a little kid.
Okay, I'd never seen it.
Yeah.
The 1994 version was the first one I ever watched. Like I said, that was like a year or two ago.
Yeah.
So I'd never seen this one before.
What
do you think of it?
It did not hold up for me. Well,
did you like it when you were a kid?
I liked it when I was a kid.
Uh-huh.
I didn't feel that it held up until I saw the 1949 version, and then I thought, oh no, the 1933 version is great.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to say one quick thing. We're not really going to talk about them one at a time because the 1949 version is a remake of the 1933 version.
And when he says remake, it's very literal. The script was the same.
It's the same. Yeah, it's the same script.
They added to it a little bit, but it is literally, it's very weird to watch those two movies back to back because this isn't something we see very much nowadays. I feel like you would never see two movies of the same thing, but also the same script.
Right.
Because they were both MGM, right? So it's the same studio.
Well, RKO was the first one.
Okay.
But RKO didn't really exist by that point.
Okay.
In 1949.
Right. The acting in the 1933 version, like all of these actors were like, they had been silent movie actors. Like, when was the first talking movie? 1920 something?
Just like 27.
Yeah. So like 5 or 6 years before this, these actors had been working actors, but they were in silent movies. Like talkies was so new. Like it's hard to think about how long ago 1933 was. So it's hard to fault them for the acting style, but it's also a little bit hard to watch in present day. What do you think?
So yeah, it is hard to fault them, but I think we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah,
what did you think
of this movie?
I didn't care for it. When we look back at movies from that era, there are some that can kind of rise above the limitations of the time.
Yeah.
This to me is not one of those movies.
No.
This to me is a movie that suffered from poor plotting.
Yeah.
And some really, really questionable acting the entire time. It's very overwrought. And there's one thing I want to talk about, and this has to do specifically with the 33 and the 49 version, but I think it might be a lot bigger than that. I think it really suffers from the way people viewed Little Women at that time. And I think the way people viewed Little Women was, this is, if only life could be this way.
Right.
If only families could be this way. If only people could respect their mothers this way. If only every mother could be Marmee.
Right.
And I think people, as time went on, I think there was a growing appreciation for how progressive Louisa May Alcott and her family were.
Yes.
The marches as presented in the 1933 version and the 1949 version are not, I don't think they're presented as progressive in any way.
No, they're not interesting people. And I also feel like there is a strong dependence on assuming the viewer has read the book.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot that's assumed. There's a lot that's assumed that you know.
Yeah.
So they can just skip over tons of stuff.
Right.
And like leave you to fill in the gaps because you've read the book.
Yeah. I think the biggest character that suffers in those earlier versions is Marmee.
Yeah.
There's nothing to her.
Yeah.
At all.
She's basically like Scarlett O'Hara's mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like very placid.
She's just nice and supportive and loves them, but you don't get a sense. And so one of the things I really liked in the book is there is a conversation that Marmee has with Joe, where Marmee talks about it. She talks about her problems with anger management.
Yes, yeah.
It's a great part of the book where Marmee basically says, you may not know this, but I have spent my entire life being really angry. And I have to keep a lid on it.
And this is right after. Sorry to interrupt. This is right after Joe's anger has gotten her into trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's something that you would never know about seeing the 33 or the 49 version.
Right. The 94 version you would. There are scenes where she is very angry.
Yes.
Yes.
So in those versions, you just don't get that.
Yeah.
You really, really don't get that. And I think that really speaks to the entire piece. It is just very wholesome.
Yeah.
It's very, very wholesome.
Aggressively wholesome.
Aggressively so.
Yes. Yeah. So I think we can talk about the 1949 one. Like I said, the like you said, the 33 and 49 are super intertwined because the script is like, I'm not even saying similar. It's the same. They use the same script. Mm-hmm. Which means that the weird stuff that they added is still there.
Yeah.
Like, there's a party that in the book, Meg and Joe are invited to a fancy Christmas party near the beginning of the book. And Laurie is also there, and that's kind of how they get acquainted with him, right? Joe goes to kind of hide in the back, and Laurie's there, and they end up having fun together.
I will just say a quick thing. His name is Theodore Lawrence.
Theodore Lawrence.
Right. So they call him Laurie.
They call him Laurie.
For anyone who hasn't read the book or seen the movie.
But in the 33 and 49 versions, the party is being hosted by the Lawrence grandfather at his house. It's Laurie's party, and all 4 girls go, which would have been totally inappropriate for like a 12 and 13-year-old girl to go to a party without their mother. Of course, it was helped by the fact that the actresses were 25 and pregnant. But the scene in the 33 version where Amy gets scolded by her teacher and then comes out into the hallway where all the little girls are, who are actually little girls, is so, I'm going to say this, so fucking bizarre, because there's a grown-ass woman 9 months pregnant with all of these little girls who are actually little girls. She looks like a ventriloquist dummy. Like, it's just bizarre.
Yeah. So this is
anyway. I'm sorry. What was I talking about?
So you were talking about just how weird it is to see these grown women play these little. Can I talk about that for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is probably my biggest problem with the 1933 and the 49 versions. You've got women who are in their mid-20s.
Early 30s.
And sometimes early 30s. Specifically Joe. I'm going to talk about one scene in particular.
Yeah.
Or one set of scenes. Any time that Joe and Laurie are interacting when they first meet and early on in their friendship, it's very playful. They're running around a lot.
They're children.
They're children.
They're literally children.
They're absolutely children. And in both the versions we've seen, they are played by people who are from the ages of 25 to 32.
Yeah.
It's not, here's the problem with it for me. It's not cute. It's disturbing. Well, I found it very disturbing because these people look stunted.
Right. Well, all of them look stunted. Like, all of them look
emotionally.
And also there were a couple of points, like in the Joe and Laurie scenes, especially when like he comes to propose to her.
Yeah.
That I think I leaned over and I said to you, like, they look like they could have sex right now. Like, it was so adult. It was very adult. Like, it was very strange. But I'm gonna move on to the 1949 version because we have something on this topic. So Amy is played by a 17-year-old girl in 1949.
Right.
Amy is concerned about her looks. Amy is wears a clothespin on her nose to sleep. That's in the book.
Yep.
Amy is vain and as played in this version, very stupid, very bimbo-ish, but I want to go back to she is concerned about her looks and not being pretty.
Yeah.
Because Amy is played by Elizabeth Taylor, famously the most beautiful woman in the world. Famously so.
Yeah.
So it rings a little hollow to me. How did you feel about it?
It just makes her look stupid.
So stupid.
So she's supposed to be a vain, innocent little girl. Instead, she comes off as an incredibly stupid, stunted adult.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make you... Here's the thing that I got from the book. You're supposed to like Amy.
Yeah.
Amy's a character we like. I did not like her at all in the 33 and the 49 versions.
No.
I found her awful. And there's no point that I end up actually liking her.
Yeah. That's true. Let's talk about Beth in 1939. In 1949.
In 1949. You liked Beth a lot.
Well, I also want to say something before we get to Beth, actually. I want to talk about the movie making a little bit, and you can probably speak to this better than I can.
Okay.
But, like, so this was 1949, using a script from 1933.
Right.
So, as far as advancements in movie making, I mean, like, it's so hollow and saccharine, and expecting us to take seriously a 32-year-old woman playing a 16-year-old girl. And I was watching this going, you know what? This was released 1 year before All About Eve.
Right.
Which is one of the best movies of all time. Like, top 5 for me, certainly.
I'd call that a popular opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that because All About Eve is about acting and theater and movies, it's about theater mostly, but also Hollywood a little bit. A huge plot point is that the character Margot Channing, played by Bette Davis, is turning 40 and she's still playing 18-year-olds, and how normal that was at the time.
Right.
So I just think this is a perfect illustration of what that would have looked like and how bizarre it is to our modern eyes. Does that make sense? Like in All About Eve, she as a person is really uncomfortable with this, and she keeps saying, like, she's so uncomfortable with her age and being older because everyone around her is going, no, it's fine, you can absolutely play this 18-year-old character, and she's going, no, I really can't, it's not dignified.
I actually think, you when you said this to me before, I've been thinking about this for a while. I really think that the 1949 Little Women and All About Eve would make an amazing double feature. Because All About Eve really is about Little Women.
Yeah.
It's about the 1949 Little Women in a lot of ways.
Can you talk about that picture you found of June Allison? So June Allison is 32. She plays Jo.
Yeah, there's a picture from a movie she was in a couple of years later. Yeah, it was later, where she's playing a child that's even younger than Jo in Little Women. And so June Allison is like 5'1". She's tiny. She's a little lady.
But she has some crow's feet. Like, this was before.
Yeah, she looks like she's in her 30s.
Yeah.
And there's just a picture of her that exists where they have her dressed up like Shirley Temple, and she's surrounded by people who tower over her who are playing adults.
And it's like not a joke. Like, she's like she is playing a 14-year-old character.
I found it upsetting.
Yeah.
I found it really upsetting.
It was upsetting.
I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I really didn't like it.
Yeah. And I also thought, what I said to you was, there was a moment that she turned. And, like, her in profile, June Allison looks like Judy Garland. Not straight on, but she looks exactly like Judy Garland.
They have a lot of similar stuff.
And she's a very similar voice. And I said...
And they were friends.
Well, what I said to you was, look up what movie Judy Garland made in 1949. I bet they wanted her for this and couldn't get her. And you did look her up, and she was in some movie.
Yeah. It shouldn't surprise anyone that Judy Garland was in a movie in 1949.
Right.
She's a big movie star.
A big movie star. The biggest star.
Yeah.
A Star is Born.
Right. Was the movie she was in.
It's very true.
So what did you think about some of the other people in the 1933 and 49? Can we talk about Laurie?
Well, I started talking about Beth in the 1949 one.
We should talk about Beth.
And then we come back to Laurie.
Right.
So Beth is played by Margaret O'Brien, who was the little sister in, not Streetcar Named Desire, Mimi in St. Louis.
Okay.
Well, they go on the streetcar. There's a song about the streetcar.
All right.
Clearly, they wanted Margaret O'Brien, and they also had Liz Taylor, and they were like, okay, well, Liz Taylor can't play Beth because we want her to be the beautiful sister. So Margaret O'Brien is going to have to be Beth, but she's 12. And so I guess we'll just have to make her the youngest sister. Mm-hmm. And they never actually explicitly say.
And luckily she dies before she gets any older.
Right. But the weird thing to me is they didn't change anything about the script. They never explicitly say, Beth, as the youngest of the family, what are your opinions on this topic? They just clearly made her the youngest, especially, again, I'm sorry to keep harping on it, but the actress playing her sister, who's supposed to be 2 years older than her, is 20 years older than her.
Yeah.
Who could easily be her mother.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no joke, easily be her mother. So it makes it odd. And the other funny thing about Beth, so, okay, I don't know that we've actually explicitly mentioned this. Beth dies.
I think I've said it a few times.
We keep saying someone dies.
Yeah.
Beth dies. Beth dies in the book later than I think people tend to remember. Because she gets really, really sick and then she gets better. And then she dies and that's when she's 15, and she dies in her 20s because her heart has been weakened forever by the scarlet fever, and she just never gets better. And so Beth has kind of a death scene in the 1949 version, which is remarkable because it is the exact same dialogue as Beth's death scene in the 1933 version.
Mm-hmm.
But in that version, the older version, she's lying in bed dying, clearly dying, and Joe comes in to talk to her, and she has this speech about how she's, you know, she's made her peace with it, and like she's learning how to accept her fate and all this stuff. In the 1949 version, the way that it happens is Joe is like up at the attic, upset because her little sister is dying, and Margaret O'Brien as Beth, looking completely healthy and well, by the way.
She looks fine.
Fine.
Yeah.
Comes in, and they have the exact same conversation, but it's just really strange to hear a little 12-year-old girl who looks 12, who is 12 and looks 12, and who's also a very good actress. Like,
she is. So if Katharine Hepburn is the best person in the 33 version, I think Margaret O'Brien is the best person in the 49 version.
A fabulous actress, little actress. Having the same conversation about how she's resigned herself to death, but there's nothing wrong with her. It looks like a horror movie. Like, it makes it seem like a horror movie. Well, let me just finish and then you can say. But then the weird thing is that is her death scene. So after that, she's just not there anymore. But because they didn't change any of the other dialogue, nobody says like, oh, we're really sad that Beth died. She's just gone forever.
No, there was a really big part of me when we were watching that because of how weird it is that I was fully expecting them to say that the scene that Beth never actually came to Joe to talk to her, but she had already passed.
It was her spirit.
And her spirit came to Joe in a dream and said all of these things.
Honest to God, that would have made more sense.
I was fully expecting that. The way it was staged, it would have made much more sense.
Yeah.
And of course, there's no ghosts in this book.
No, but like, I feel like that would have been a more logical change than what they actually did.
Yeah. So that's I feel like we've said a lot of things about the sisters.
Yeah. I think
let's talk about the men.
Yeah. I think you want to talk about Laurie.
Let's talk about Laurie. He is a disturbing man-child who has no emotional maturity whatsoever and looks like he's 30.
I mean, at least you would think that if the only versions you had ever seen were 33 and 49.
I did not care for him in either.
No.
That's all I have to say about Laurie.
I mean, he's a weird old man. Like, he's a weird old man. He's super freaking creepy. I don't remember which one it is. The two actors, by the way, from 33 and 49 are completely indistinguishable. Although I believe in both cases, they were 26. Both were 26. But there's one point where one of them grows a mustache, and I was like, oh my God, he looks so much better. Like, It was just so creepy.
That was the 33 version, I think.
It was just so creepy that he was so old.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else to say about that. It was just so strange.
I want to say one thing right now.
Oh, and also, I again forget which version, but the actor playing his tutor, Mr. Brooke, who eventually marries Meg, is like younger than him, we found, or the same age.
Around the same age.
Yeah.
Yeah, not old enough to be his tutor.
Yeah, it was very weird.
No, I want to say one thing right now to our audience. If there's anyone listening to this who loves the 33 version of the 49 version, I'm sorry. I am legitimately sorry. So I want to say, when we went to Orchard House, there was a lovely woman that took us on a tour of the house. It was informative. It was wonderful. She was an absolute sweetheart. And when we got to the end, we asked her, what's your favorite version of Little Women? What movie? And she goes, oh, absolutely the June Allison version. And we go, oh, that's really nice. We had already watched it.
And hated it.
But she was such a sweetheart that I am feeling a little bad right now because it may be someone else's favorite movie.
Yeah.
And favorite version of it. So I just want to say, if this is you, we are sorry. We're sorry. However, we do think that our criticism is valid.
I think you're right, but I think we're also right.
Yes, that both of those things can happen.
But what you said to me was, because she was an older lady.
Yeah.
And what you said to me was, what version do you think she grew up with? And I said, obviously the 49 one, in the same way that I grew up with the 94 one. So of course that's your favorite.
Yeah, and so the 94 version is your favorite.
Right.
It just also happens to be the best version.
Right.
But let's accept
far.
this. If it wasn't the best version, I still think it would be your favorite version because it's the one you grew up with.
Yes.
It's the one that came out when you were a kid.
Right. So speaking of other things, oh no, I'm sorry, we can't go to that yet. We have to talk about Professor Bear.
Yeah. So Professor Bear, as described in the book, is German.
Mm-hmm.
He's 40.
Yes.
He's a little overweight. Mm-hmm. He's a big guy. He's got a big bushy beard.
Great big bushy beard.
A great big bushy beard.
Disheveled.
His clothes are, not the best clothes. They're patched here and there. His shoes have patches on them.
His socks have patches.
That's how he's described.
Yeah.
I was annoyed as a bearded man myself. At no point in any version that we watched did he have a beard.
No.
So
never a beard. Not one beard.
I take issue with that.
Sorry, babe.
But anyway, but I digress. So that's Professor Bear as described in the books.
But also he's kind to children.
Oh, as a person.
He's kind to servants. Mm-hmm. He has a charming accent. He tries to teach Joe German.
Right. But all of those things that I said, those are in direct opposition to Laurie, who is... Who the readers wanted Joe to end up with.
Right.
Because he's young and he's dashing, he's handsome.
He's rich. Oh, the professor's very poor.
Yeah, he's very poor. He stands in direct opposition to Laurie.
Right.
And this was one of the things I said before about the second half of the book being subversive. I really appreciated the fact that Louisa May Alcott was willing to have her characters subvert the audience's expectations.
Yeah.
I was really, really happy about that. So Joe ends up with Professor Bear. And I don't know that we necessarily need to get into in this moment, like the scene in which that they profess their love for each other. But you can tell over the course of their story together that they love each other.
There's a whole second book written about what they do after.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's Professor Bear. Now, this was one thing. So one of the, we found that even though the 33 and the 49 version were based on the same script, there were some really fundamental differences between them.
Right.
We talked about Margaret O'Brien.
Yeah.
We actually have an actual child playing one of the children.
The only time. No, sorry, not true.
One of two times. So that's one big difference between them. But one of the other differences is Professor Bear.
Yeah.
So let's talk about him in the 33 version,
okay,
as played by an actor named Paul Lucas.
Right.
So he plays him. He is not German. He is Hungarian, which starts a really nice, a
progression away from German.
Exactly. It starts a really nice tradition of having actors play Professor Bear who are not American, but also not German.
Well, I was going to say, no, he's Canadian.
William Shatner is Canadian.
Yeah. So there you go.
Exactly. And not German. So Paul Lucas is maybe the closest of all of the versions.
He is Hungarian.
He is Hungarian. I liked him in it.
Uh-huh.
I didn't hate him in it.
No.
I thought he was fine. He got the essence of the character right, I thought, which was he's very kind.
Yes.
He's not the most confident man.
Right.
I
right. He
like
kept saying,
that.
"Oh, I'm an old fool. Oh no, don't listen to me."
And there's one scene. It's really funny to me. There's one scene that he's in that represents both his best interpretation of the character and also his worst interpretation of the character. And he's singing a song. He's singing a traditional German song,
yes,
and he's in this house that Joe is living in New York City. That's where she meets him, and she comes down to listen to him play the piano and sing this song. Now, him singing the song is very real. It's very sweet. It's very touching. I found it very authentic. Mm-hmm. Him playing the piano, it's one of the worst examples of someone not playing an instrument in a movie that I have ever seen.
Yeah.
It's just the same hand motions over and over and over again with this beautiful piano music coming from it. I would advise anyone to watch it. I think it was
like he moves
ridiculous.
His hand once and like 6 different notes play.
It's ridiculous. I liked him. And I would say that there's one thing that happens in the movie that proved to me that you kind of liked him too.
What's that?
Because you cried.
I did cry.
You cried.
I cried a little bit.
Would you like to tell the audience, for those of you that haven't read this book, would you like to tell the audience about the big line?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
And it not necessarily word perfect.
No, I got burned on this a couple times.
Yeah, so we're gonna paraphrase right now, but tell everyone about this scene.
And also it's written in dialect, which I'm not even going to attempt.
No.
The professor has professed. See what I did there?
Yeah, I see it.
He has professed his love for Joe. This is the end of the book, the very end of the book. Professed his love.
She has accepted his love.
She has accepted him, or at least given him to understand that she is also in love with him. Mm-hmm. And he says, Thou givest me such hope and joy, and I have nothing to give you but these empty hands. And then the line is, Jo never, never would learn to be proper, for she blah blah basically she puts her hands in his and says, not empty now.
Right.
And I cry every time. I'm crying now.
Yeah. It's really, really sweet. So I want to talk about this line a little bit.
Yeah.
So this line is done very well in the 33 version because it's Katharine Hepburn delivering the line. It's Katharine Hepburn, the best actor in the movie, delivering the line to Paul Lucas, who actually did a really good job playing Professor Bear.
Yes.
It's the last line in the movie.
Yes.
It's done very well.
And then they go into the house and he gets his umbrella stuck in the door.
Yeah, it turns inside out. It's a whole thing.
It's not supposed to happen.
It takes a little bit out of the scene. But it's a really, really good line. And I just want to say one quick thing about reading this book.
Yeah.
So I did not read this book. I listened to it, which is reading it.
Of course
Let's
it is.
be clear about that.
Why would it not be?
So I had about an hour left in this book at one point, and I decided that the way I wanted to listen to the last hour of it was to actually get in my car and drive through Concord. So I drove past Walden Pond, and I drove through Old Concord, and I drove past Orchard House. So I got to listen to this scene being in the place where it was written. And it was a really transformational experience for me.
Aw.
Like for the book. It's one of the best times I've ever... It's one of the only thing I can compare it to is when you're listening to a song in the car and you're driving through a part of the country that completely goes along with the song you're listening to.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, maybe that's pretentious.
No, I think that's great.
That was my experience of the line. It's a great line. And in the 1933 version, it's done very well.
Yes.
I'd say it's one of the best moments in the movie.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's Professor Bear in 1933.
Yes.
Let's talk about Professor Bear in 1949.
Yes. So what is this actor's name?
So the actor's name is Rossano Brazzi.
Yes.
Also known as the lead from South Pacific.
Right, the movie of South Pacific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the role made famous, I believe, by Ezio Pinza.
There you go.
Yeah.
So as the name implies, he's Italian.
I want to go back to the way I originally described Professor Bear. He is not very handsome.
He's the right
he's
age,
not,
I believe.
He's not particularly handsome.
Right.
He's 40.
Yeah.
He's bearded, not particularly well dressed, and he's poor. In one word, could you describe this actor in 1949?
In one word?
In one word.
Sexy.
Very sexy. He is goddamn handsome. He is incredibly handsome.
He's a matinee idol.
Like, he looks like someone whose job it is to be handsome.
Yeah.
He is the most handsome man
His
in the
age
entire
is correct.
movie.
I believe he is 40 or 42.
Yeah, but June Allison's 32.
Right, that's what I'm saying. They're appropriately aged for each other.
Yeah, in real life.
Yes,
in
real
real
life.
they could definitely be a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah. He is also Italian.
Yeah.
His German accent as an Italian is as bad as William Shatner's German accent as a Canadian. It's really bad. It's funny. I feel like when you first meet him in the movie, he's actually doing a German accent, but then eventually he's just doing an Italian accent.
Yeah, he kind of loses it.
I mean, clearly, I see these like kind of New York movie producers sitting there go like, "We got a sexy guy. We got him. He's great. Well, he's from Italy. It's the same thing.
It's
the audiences won't know."
They're all Europeans.
Yeah. He's fine. I actually think he's good in the movie.
He's so attractive.
He's just so poorly cast.
Yeah.
He should never have been this character.
No.
He is. Here's what I think he is. And
He
you tell
should
me
have
if I'm
gotten
wrong.
together with Liz Taylor.
Yeah. Yeah. You tell me if I'm wrong about this.
Yeah,
if I'm on the wrong path with this. Professor Bear, as played by Rossano Brazzi, is the Professor Bear that I think a lot of people see in their minds when they read the book.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
He's...
I bet he's so handsome.
You know what? Now that I'm saying this, I feel like you could make a case for the fact that the 49 version
is how Jo sees him.
is how Jo sees the world.
That's really sweet, actually.
So for example, like he's the way Jo sees him, and that scene between her and Beth.
She sees Beth as a child.
As a perfect child who was healthy until the day she died.
Well,
she doesn't see her as unhealthy, but looking. She doesn't look unhealthy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, that's a very interesting reading of it. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's what they intended.
Absolutely not.
Even a little.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So he is too handsome.
Yes.
That is my big criticism. He's too handsome.
Yeah. So we've been going for about an hour. Do you have anything else to say about the 33 or the 49 before we move on?
I have one more thing to say.
Go ahead.
And this has to do with Marmee.
Yeah.
And another character. So my big problem with Marmee in 33 and 49 is that she is portrayed as good personified.
Yes.
Let's talk about Aunt March for a second.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay, so I want you to describe Aunt March to me from the book. Who is she?
She is their great aunt.
Uh-huh.
So she's their father's aunt.
Yep.
Not their father's sister.
Right.
His aunt.
Right.
She is elderly, rich,
Yep.
crotchety, but a warm heart.
Yeah.
A warm heart. She's very set in her ways.
Does she love them?
Yes, she loves them.
A lot, right?
A lot, yeah. Like, she leaves Joe her house when she dies.
Does her family mean a lot to her?
Yes.
Even though she's kind of crotchety?
Yes.
Okay. Can you please describe her in the 1933
Oh my
and
gosh,
49
she
version?
hates them all. She just hates them all. She's like an evil. She's like the Wicked Witch.
She's the villain.
Yeah.
She is the villain of these movies. And these are books. This is a book that doesn't have a villain.
Yeah.
At all. There's no antagonist.
None whatsoever.
She is the antagonist of these
is
movies.
like the war.
Yeah. The
Or their own. The antagonist is their own like turbulent spirit.
Yeah, their own humanity.
Yeah.
So so there's one example I want to give of her, the way she's portrayed actually undermining the plot.
Yeah.
So there's a scene in the book where they find out that their father's been injured and their mom has to go to Washington, D.C. to be with him.
In the book, he's sick. Every single movie they say he's been wounded, but he's sick.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Fair enough. Maybe these movies were better than I'm saying they are because they clearly made an impression on me.
Whatever.
So she's got to go to Washington. They don't have enough money for a ticket to get her down there.
Yeah.
So how do they make the money? Who comes up with the cash for the trip?
Joe is told, go to Aunt March and borrow money.
Mm-hmm.
She goes. She loses her nerve. She says she's going to rant and rave. I don't want to hear it from her. So instead, she goes and sells her hair for $25.
That's how they make the money.
Correct.
It's a really sweet scene. She sacrificed her hair.
Yes.
And it's a great scene.
It's very important.
In the 1903 and 49 version, first of all, how did they include Aunt March in this?
What do you in this particular scene?
So she comes up with the money.
She comes up with the money. Well, Joe in both versions, Joe goes to her house, asks her for it.
Mm-hmm.
She says no. Well, she doesn't really say no, but she kind of just screams at Joe about how her father's a ne'er-do-well.
Mm-hmm.
Joe gets frustrated and leaves. Then
it's really set up as a scene when you really get to see Joe you get to see the hero tell
her
off the villain.
Yeah. And then Aunt March shows up at the family's house and says, I didn't really mean any of that. Here's the money.
Right.
And then Joe shows up with all her hair chopped off.
Yeah. So Aunt March is presented in a way she's not presented in the book. And it turns out that Joe cutting her hair off didn't matter. Didn't help at all.
Meant nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
Yes.
That's all I have to say about those two movies.
Yes.
I might bring up something later, but that's what I've got to say.
Great.
So as a means of an interlude,
Yes.
I'd like to talk about the 1980 Japanese animated version of Little Women.
Yes.
So I want to give a quick background on this. So this was animated by Toei Animation, and it was a TV special. It was an hour long, and it actually led into a 26-episode series.
Okay.
There was also an 87 animated series, anime series, but this is separate from that. This is something that I didn't know existed until you introduced it to me.
Right. And the reason that I knew it existed was because I said, oh, we had this weird anime VHS tape when I was a kid. We got to watch that too.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't remember how freaking trippy it was.
It is bug fuck nuts. It is bonkers. This thing is absolutely crazy.
Do you want to just pick out like a couple of things that struck you?
I would love,
completely
as we were
insane?
watching it, you were writing things down. I was telling you to write things down.
Yeah.
I just want to blow through them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
So you've got your notes there, right?
Yes.
Let's go through them.
Okay. So at the beginning of the book, the girls are doing a play. The hero's name is Rodrigo.
Yeah.
In this, they change it to Lodigo.
Lodrigo. It's not Lodigo. I don't know where you get that from.
I wrote that down.
It's Lodrigo.
And we think, now I hope this doesn't come across as like racist.
We're making a really big, if anything, yeah, okay. We're making a pretty big assumption
that
here.
they changed this name to make it easier for Japanese actors to say.
And then when they were changing it back to be dubbed by English speakers, they didn't change it back.
That's what we think.
Yeah.
Could be very wrong.
Very, very strange.
Yes. There's definitely some interesting like Japanese style bowing that happens. Like when Aunt March comes in, everybody bows to her in the Japanese style.
Yeah, all the girls, when they laugh, they cover their mouths.
Yes.
All of them the entire time.
There's also some very interestingly, I have no idea if this was like written in Japanese and then translated to English or what that was about.
It's worth watching. It's on YouTube.
There's a couple of strange lines, one of which is Lori to Joe, "I hope it doesn't bother you. I'm so much richer than you are."
Yeah, it's weird.
It's really weird. There's one also Lori to Joe, like, "Your sister Meg has mature beauty like an adult woman," and it's very creepy. And then I would say the one benefit, the one positive note I have to say about this version is because it's animation, the children look like children.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which up till this point was something that we didn't believe could be done.
Correct.
In live action.
Right.
Because there was no evidence to that.
Right. Now, do you want to talk about the weird scene?
No, I want to talk about one other thing before we get to that scene.
Okay.
So probably one of the weirdest things about this, and this was something that you were not aware of when you watched it when you were a kid.
Yeah.
It is almost a shot-for-shot remake of the 1949 version.
Oh, yeah, which is itself a remake of the 1933 version.
It's very, very strange.
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole invented scene where Joe is coming up to the house and her sisters are watching her from the window, and she goes to jump across her fence, and she trips and falls on her face. So she runs around the fence and does it again.
And they're laughing at her from the window.
It is identical in both versions.
It's very strange.
And invented. It's very, very crazy.
Yeah.
So, and that happens throughout is her whole conversation that she has with Aunt March, where she goes to her and asks for the money, and she says, "No, your father's deadbeat," and then she goes and cuts her hair, but Aunt March gives her the money anyway.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same in all three of these versions.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Very weird. Now can I talk about the scene?
Yes, please.
So this is a scene that is not in the book, and it's not in any of the other versions. And I can't tell whether it was wrong to put it in or brilliant to put it in. I can't tell.
Whether it was wrong or oh so very right.
They're all hanging out by the river, and suddenly coming down the river is a young escaped slave boy on a raft. It capsizes, and one of the characters has to jump in and save him.
Animated in such a way. God, we're treading in terrible territory here. I will just say, animated in such a way that you would be forgiven if you thought this was drawn by a Japanese person who had never seen a black person.
I would agree with that.
Yes.
It's interesting.
I mean, he looks like a blackface character.
Yeah. It's nigh unto troubling.
It is disturbing.
Yeah. But anyway, they save him. They are incredibly kind to him. They're incredibly supportive of him.
They talked about the horrors of slavery. They talk about how unfair it is. They talk about how they're working to change it. Like, all of that is great.
It's great. There's a bigger awareness in the Japanese version of the Civil War.
Yeah.
Which, if it's made for Japanese audiences, makes sense.
Like, it leads in with a whole thing about the Civil War.
Yeah. You know, if you're an American person, you know about the Civil War. If you're a Japanese person, you may not know as much.
Yeah.
So I actually think it makes a lot of sense, but it's very, very strange.
Just the way it's animated. First of all, it's very strange.
The dialogue is a little offensive.
Is very offensive. The way that he speaks is very offensive. You said to me before he even like had occasion to speak, like, what do you think he's going to sound like? And I said, oh, he'll probably just sound like everybody else. He did not.
No.
He did not. I'm not gonna go into what he sounded like.
It was real Song of the South type stuff.
It was very Song of the South. It was awful.
Yeah.
It was really upsetting. But
and yet I have a lot of respect for them putting it in.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an important storyline. Like the Alcotts were abolitionists. Mm-hmm. Like that was very important to them.
Yeah. This, by the way, Adapter Parish is a very anti-slavery podcast.
Yeah.
If you are pro-slavery, this may not be the podcast for you.
This is a very controversial statement.
Super controversial.
We're gonna come out and say slavery was bad.
It's bad.
No, we actually learned at Orchard House that the Alcotts actually hid escaped slaves on the Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
In their house.
They're great.
Not that house that we were in, but the other house that they used to live in next door.
So do you have anything else you want to say about the animated version?
Nope.
So let's talk about 94.
Yes.
Can I lead into it with something?
Yeah, of course.
I want to pick up on what you just said.
Yeah.
We went to Orchard House and we learned some really interesting thing about the Alcotts.
Yes.
Things about the Alcotts. Do you know who else went to Orchard House and learned some really interesting things about them?
Everybody who made this movie.
Everyone who made this movie. What's your relationship with this movie?
I love it.
That's it. Full stop.
I love it.
Full stop.
Yeah.
I liked it when you first showed it to me.
Yeah.
Having gone through this now, I love it. And I think it's one of my favorite adaptations ever.
That's awesome. Like there were I love that there were like shots in the house that they made the house laid out the same, that I was going, we were just there.
Yeah. So some things I found out about it. First of all, it was written by Robin Swycord. Robin Swycord directed a number of different adaptations. She did Matilda, Memoirs of a Geisha.
She directed or she wrote?
Wrote.
Yeah.
The Jane Austen Book Club, and she actually was nominated for an Academy Award for the script for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. So adaptations are kind of her bag. She helped develop this movie for 12 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Another thing she did that I found out about, she actually went back to contemporary diaries of people of that time, because she knew in reading the book that Louisa May probably wasn't being very accurate about the way people spoke.
Oh, yeah.
So she went to actual diaries of the time to find out how to write the dialogue.
That's fantastic.
She's great. I love her.
Because we noticed they did not say Christopher Columbus one single time.
Not once, which is like a thing that Joe exclaims once in the book.
Once in the book, they made it almost like a mantra in the 33 version.
It's her catchphrase.
It's her catchphrase. In this, they say blast a lot, which is kind of cute.
Yeah. It was produced by Denise DeNovi, who also did Heathers and Edward Scissorhands. So she already had a relationship with Winona Ryder.
Oh, yeah, clearly.
My understanding is they wanted Winona Ryder, so they brought in Denise DeNovi to produce because she had a relationship with Winona Ryder.
Got it.
And it was directed by Gillian Armstrong,
Yes,
who was a
woman director.
Woman director. So it was directed by a woman, written by a woman, who both were intimately familiar with the subject matter.
And produced by a woman.
And produced by a woman.
Yeah.
And Robin Swycord, I found out, was there the entire time.
That's amazing.
She didn't just write it and hand in the script. She was present for the filming of it. So based on that stuff alone, I love this adaptation.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even get into the cast.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to say about the creative powers behind it?
No.
There's one other thing I wanted to say.
Yes.
Apparently, Gillian Armstrong actually pushed to shoot at Orchard House. She really wanted to shoot it in Concord.
Yeah.
Because it's a working museum, they weren't able to.
Yeah, and the rooms are very small. I think that would have been very difficult.
So they built a new house. They were able to make the rooms bigger so they could shoot in them, but it looks just like Orchard House.
Yeah, they laid it out exactly the same. Like the front door is in the same place.
Not only does it look just like it, this is a bigger thing. They call it Orchard House.
Yeah, they specifically call it Orchard House. They mention the social work house where Marmee worked. They call it Hope House. They call it by its actual name. She was the first social worker in Boston.
Yep.
There's other. They mention Walden Pond specifically. Like they definitely go out of their way to set it in Concord, Massachusetts, not just in oldie-timey land.
Yeah, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but that makes the movie as much a movie about Louisa May Alcott and her family as it is about the story of the Little Women.
Yeah, and especially just like some of the things that they say, like Marmee talks about, I don't believe in restricting girls to the house in corsets. Like that's not something Marmee says in the book, but that's probably something that Abba Alcott would have said.
Yeah.
Like they talk about women voting, for example.
Yeah.
Just all kinds of stuff that they would have been into, the Alcott family. The other thing I will say that I felt really brought the movie together, as far as on the production side, it's more about casting, but I think I mentioned this before, but this is the only version. So the actresses' ages were not the same as the characters' ages, but they were in the same order, if that makes sense. So they weren't like 17, 12, 32, 22. It was like they went up in age. They actually went up in age, which made them seem far more like sisters because that's the ages that sisters would be.
Yeah.
Like, even if Meg was 25 and Amy was 12 and the other two were in the middle, they still were in the right order to be sisters.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, Winona Ryder she doesn't look older than Trini Alvarado, who plays... So let's go through them for a second.
Yeah.
So Trini Alvarado plays Meg. She's also in Frighteners. So it's really funny. Both of us had a movie from the 90s that we both loved that Trini Alvarado was in.
Mine was Little Women.
And mine was The Frighteners.
There you go.
And then we found out about each of those movies together.
Correct.
Winona Ryder plays Jo.
Yeah.
She's fantastic.
She's 23.
She's fantastic.
She's only 23.
And 23, but they make her look like a 15-year-old.
Yeah, like you said, God, I don't know how it is that she looks older in the second half. She's the same person. And they do her hair different. They do her costumes different. Like they are so meticulous about making the people seem like real people.
Yeah. There's scenes early in the movie when she first meets Laurie, played by Christian Bale,
Yes.
where they seem like children.
Yeah.
They seem like children playing. In fact, Christian Bale, I think they do such a good job of making him seem like a 15-year-old when he's really, how old is he?
He was 20.
He was 20.
Yeah.
They do such a good job of that when he actually plays someone in his early 20s later in the movie, I didn't buy it as much.
Yeah.
I think he looks too young.
Yeah, which is funny because he's actually younger than the older Amy.
Yeah.
'Cause she was like 24.
Right. Claire Danes
Plays Beth.
plays Beth.
She's lovely. She's only 15.
She's one of the best parts of the movie.
Yeah.
She destroyed me.
Yeah.
Claire Danes in this movie destroyed me.
Claire Danes can cry like no other actress in the world,
Mm-hmm.
I think. Like, just her entire face just melts off.
Yeah. There's a scene in the movie when she goes, so the way she gets scarlet fever is she visits this German family, this poor German family.
Yeah.
And they have scarlet fever. So that's how she gets
the
it.
baby dies.
And there's a whole scene where she goes there and the mother hands this baby to her and the baby's crying and Beth just starts crying. She's just so overwhelmed by
And the
the
mother's
situation.
like screaming at her in German, and
Yeah.
she's clearly a child,
Mm-hmm.
and she's in a situation that she doesn't understand.
Yeah, and Gillian Armstrong was talking in the commentary about this, that after the scene was shot, she looks at Claire Danes' mother, who was on set, because Claire Danes is like 15.
Yeah.
And she's looking at her going like, oh, I made her daughter cry a lot. And her mother's response was, that's going to be really good for the movie.
Yeah.
which is good. Claire Danes is wonderful.
Yeah.
And then you have two actresses playing Amy.
Yep.
Which, who knew that this was the most revolutionary thought, that you could have two actresses play a character who ranges
different
from
ages.
12 to 20.
Yeah.
And yet they do it.
Yes.
So Kirsten Dunst plays young Amy,
Who is 12.
who is 12.
Playing a 12-year-old.
She's
Amazing.
fresh off Interview with a Vampire.
Someone is playing a character of their same age. In fact, I believe that is the only instance in all of these adaptations of the actress being the same age as the character.
Yep, it's revolutionary.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about her playing this character is Amy says and does awful stuff.
Because she's a child.
Yeah.
A tiny child.
So when you have someone playing her who's 20, she just seems like a terrible adult.
Yeah, Elizabeth Taylor, I think, is the perfect example of this. She just seems like there's something wrong with her.
Yeah. And Amy in this movie seems like a child.
Yes.
She does things that none of us approve of.
Yes.
But she's a kid.
Yeah.
She's a kid.
Yeah.
It's fine.
She's a baby.
Yeah. And then old Amy is played by
Samantha Mathis.
who I had a crush on Samantha Mathis for a really long time.
Did you?
Yeah, because of Broken Arrow.
Okay.
Yeah, she's great. I really like Samantha
fine. She's
Mathis. Those are the kids.
Yes. So
Do you have anything to say about them? About them or the scenes they're in or their casting?
Yes. I mean, I do want to say, like, this version, so we watched two versions that were basically exactly the same.
Yeah.
And this version definitely brought in far more scenes from the book that we didn't see in any other version.
Mm-hmm.
We saw Laurie bring them the post office. We saw the Pickwick Club and Laurie being admitted to it. We saw the scene where Amy falls through the ice. When Meg and Joe go to the party, it's only them. We saw the whole scene where Meg goes to the fancy, to the Moffats, to the fancy people's house to visit.
Mm-hmm. Can I say something about that, actually?
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that I got from watching it that I thought was really well done. One of the things that I've already said I didn't respond to very well in the first half of the book is that it's very episodic.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens in this one is it both includes more of the content from the first half of the book than the other two versions did, but also weaves them together in a way that makes them not episodic anymore. It just becomes their life.
Right.
These are
Right.
just things that are happening in their life.
Right. Right. They're all kind of woven together. Like we saw Joe at Aunt March's, and then she looks out the window and she sees Amy crying outside, and she runs out, and then we know about the thing with Amy at school with the limes, whereas in the book that's just its own chapter.
Right, which for people who haven't read it, Amy gets in trouble at school and the teacher hits her and it's a whole thing, and like they pull her out of school. But these are two totally separate chapters.
Right. And I love that episode in this version because it's the one where Marmee gets angry. We see Marmee get angry, and I think we should talk about Marmee. We didn't talk about who plays Marmee in this.
Susan goddamn Sarandon.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you have to say about this? Because I got some stuff to say.
She's perfect.
She is so perfect in this. So I brought this up to you after we watched it, that a conversation we've had a lot is the idea of you cast someone so that you have to do less work to get your audience to understand who this character is.
Yes.
So Susan Sarandon is an example of that. If what you're trying to do is show Marmee as someone who is very progressive
Yes.
and very independent.
Yes.
Don't cast someone who looks like don't cast June Cleaver.
Right.
Basically.
Right. Cast Susan
Sarandon. By the way, in the few years leading up to this movie, she had done both Bull Durham and Thelma and Louise.
Yeah.
And now you've cast Susan Sarandon as Marmee.
Yeah.
She is fiercely independent. She is very progressive.
She has a temper.
She absolutely has a temper.
But she's also a kind, motherly person who gives great advice and understands what's best for her daughters as individuals.
Yeah. She's great.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say about her?
No.
She's perfect.
Great. She's perfect.
Yeah. One of the best castings I've ever seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we see Meg. Oh, what do you think about? So here's a character we really haven't mentioned. John Brooke.
So John Brooke is Laurie's tutor.
Yes.
He marries Meg. He is basically scenery in the first two movies.
Right.
There's not much to him at all.
Yes.
And in this one, he's played by almost Marty McFly, Eric Stoltz. And I thought he was great.
Yeah. Yeah, he was great, and we got like kind of a heated kissing scene between them. And the thing about it is, I think in this more than any other version, we really understood Joe's feelings about Meg growing up and getting married and going away.
Yeah.
Like that she just doesn't want things to change. She just loves her sister, and she doesn't want her to leave them.
Mm-hmm.
And in the first two, I didn't feel like we got like the human aspect behind what was happening there. She just seemed like kind of petty and jealous.
Yeah. And the first two versions, I think this kind of goes along with that. The first two versions really feel like community theater.
Yeah.
There's not really any subtlety to them at all. It really feels
There's
like
no subtext.
Yeah, it feels like a stage play.
Yes.
This one feels like life.
Yeah.
It feels like a movie, a very, very honest movie.
Yeah. Oh, can I say something about the costumes?
Yeah.
Here's something I loved about the costumes. First of all, they really
It was Colleen Atwood, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. Who's,
Yeah.
of course, very famous costume designer. Here's something I loved about the costumes. They were passed down. So one girl would be wearing a dress, and then in a later scene, you would see her younger sister wearing the same dress. Like, clearly their clothing would have been passed down between them. And even when we see Amy, who's like 20, she's wearing the dress that Meg wore to go to the party at the Moffat's house.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
and it would have been 10 years ago, or however many years ago. Like, Meg is married and has babies, and Amy is still wearing her dress.
It's an incredibly thoughtful movie.
Yes.
There a lot of care went into it. Lots of details.
Yeah.
There's one scene. Can I talk about one scene in terms of the details in it? This was maybe the scene that destroyed me more than any other scene in the movie, which is Beth's death scene.
Yeah.
Beth dies.
Yes.
And
she dies of movie disease.
Movie wasting disease.
Yes.
We talked about her death in the earlier versions and how, like, there really isn't one.
Yeah.
We see her last scene with the family, and then she's just dead.
Yeah.
And in this one, it's just her and Winona Ryder. It's just Claire Danes and Winona Ryder talking. And Winona Ryder walks over to the window because the wind is really loud and closes it. And when she looks back,
she's dead.
Beth's dead.
She's died.
And
then we see her, like...
She walks over to her.
Yeah, go ahead.
And she lays down next to her and holds her. And I found out that this was something that was based on them talking to people involved in the production who had lost family members, who had said very specifically, the thing that I want to do is just lie down and hold them.
Yeah.
So they said that is what we're going to have her do.
Yeah.
And Winona Ryder apparently was very receptive to that. But then afterwards, there's a scene that does not exist in the books. It's not in either of the other movies. And it's not even about any of the main characters. They have a housekeeper named Hannah.
Yeah.
And it's just a scene of her throwing flower petals over the room.
Right.
After they've already moved Beth out. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, just the light is coming in through the window, and everything's white and clean, and there's these beautiful flower petals. And then, so in the book, we know that Beth always took care of her dolls. Like, she loved her dolls, but she never had a new doll. She would, like, rescue old dolls that were going to be thrown out or that had been, like, mistreated. And so there's no plot about that in the movie, but we just see these very old-fashioned dolls sort of in disrepair, but, like, very neatly lined up at the end of the bed.
Yeah.
Do you want me to say what happens?
You say what happens.
And Hannah, as she's like tossing the flower petals and crying because she's like their grandmother, like she loves them. She like goes to leave the room, stops, turns back around, comes back, and tears off more petals and throws them on the dolls.
Yeah, like, and then she takes one of the doll's hands.
Yeah.
She just like holds the hand.
Yeah.
This doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with the main character.
You're crying now.
Shut up. It's great. It's really, really good movie making.
Oh, sweetie.
Stop it. Shut up. You're literally laughing at me for getting choked up right now.
No, I just think
a child
so
has
sweet.
died.
I think you're so cute.
A child has died. So there's just so many details throughout it. Christian Bale is great.
Yeah. And he's got his original teeth.
Yes, which I know is a big thing for you.
I really like his original teeth.
He feels like a kid. He doesn't feel like a stunted adult. He feels like a child.
Yeah. And he has a lot of growing and learning to do.
Yeah. Can we talk about, I feel like we've talked about all the characters. We can wrap things up a little bit more, but let's talk about one more character.
Okay.
No, we got to talk about two more characters.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's talk about Aunt March.
Okay. Aunt March is played by Mary Wicks.
Mm-hmm.
I love Mary Wicks. She's amazing.
What might people know her from?
Sister Act. You'll know her from Sister Act.
Yeah, she's one of the nuns in Sister Act.
The old nun in Sister Act.
Yeah,
the old crotchety nun in
one of the
Sister Act.
nuns who's not Maggie Smith.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's just everything that we just described Aunt March as being from the books. Like, she's crotchety, but she loves them.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
She's not an antagonist.
Right, not
at
all.
all. Yeah. She's really, really great in this. There's just a lot of really nice character moments she gets. They just all feel like real people.
Yeah.
They really feel like fully realized characters. They don't feel like actors in a community theater or regional theater.
I'm going to say community theater.
Okay. They don't feel like actors in community theater playing these characters. They really feel like people. They feel very fully realized.
Yeah.
So there's one character we haven't talked about.
Who?
Professor Bear.
Professor Bear.
So where does Gabriel Byrne rank in sexiest leading men for you?
Number one.
Number one.
Wait, leading men or Professor Bears?
Leading men in movies.
In general?
For you.
Oh, for me, I don't know, like top 10.
Top 10?
Yeah.
No, not top 5.
No, like top 10.
Which is weird because every time you talk about him, you start to flutter.
Well, just because of this movie.
Yeah.
I like him.
Why do you like Gabriel Byrne in this movie?
He's he just seems to have like a twinkle in his eye. Like, he's sort of all-knowing and very sweet, but he's not like goofy. He's not like a goofy professor. And when he talks to Jo about like sort of making her writing better and like writing from the heart, you get the feeling that it's not because he's like scolding her. It's more just that he really believes that she's better than what she's doing. He's sort of just like the kindest teacher you ever had.
He believes in her.
He believes in her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he is handsome.
He's handsome. He's very handsome.
His German accent is on point.
It's on point, and he's from
Ireland. Again, a really good tradition of never having anyone German play Professor Bear.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, they work in really great stuff. Again, they go back to the idea of what was actually the reality of Louisa May Alcott's life. There's a whole concept of transcendentalism that's not in the book and not in any of the other movies.
They really go into detail in explaining.
Yeah.
Which we don't need to explain. Like, go watch the movie.
No, go watch the movie. It's a really, really good movie.
Yeah.
He's great. And there's an aspect of their relationship that is not in the book and is not in any of the movies, but I know it's something that you really enjoyed.
Oh, yeah. Like, so they're living together in the same boarding house. Not living together, but like they live in the same boarding house. And there's a scene
in New York City.
In New York City. And there's a scene where they like go to the opera and then they kiss for the first time. Mm-hmm. And then...
Which never happens in the book.
Never happens in the book. And then, like, there's a scene later that she's, like, in the morning, she's in her room writing, and he, like, brings her coffee and, like, kisses her on the cheek, and it's like, oh, they're dating. Like, they're dating. Like, we would date someone. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's... And I think that's pretty modern for Little Women. And we can't... That's not even really based on anything from Louisa May Alcott's life, but, like, I just like it. I just like that they like each other and they know they like each other. There's not like missed communication about whether or not they like each other. Because I feel like in the earlier versions, there's this sense that he's pining for her, but she's just completely oblivious to it. Mm-hmm. And it's clear not the case in this version.
Yeah, they really have a relationship in this one. It's really nice.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say about the 94 version?
No, I think we can wrap it up.
Yeah, it's one of the best adaptations I've ever seen. It really, it now means a lot to me that it didn't before.
Yeah.
And I can't think, I would love to hear from our audience if you can think of any adaptations that are as informed by the original work as they are by the world of the author of that work.
Let us know. We'd be really interested in looking at them.
I maybe there are ones that I also love but haven't thought about them in that way. I would love to explore those in the future.
Cool. So we have a very hungry dog. Do you want to tell people quickly how they can get in touch with us?
So you can get in contact with us in a number of different ways. You can find us on the web at adaptorperishcast.com. You can tweet at us at adaptcast. You can find us on Instagram at adaptcast. And you can email us at adaptorperishcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If we got anything wrong, as always, please let us know. And if there's any suggestions you have for future episodes, please let us know. And also, finally, if the 1949 version is your favorite version,
if you are the lady that gave us the tour of Orchard House,
we would like to say hello. We loved the tour.
We're very sorry.
You did a great job, and we're very sorry.
You dealt with that man that talked over everybody very well.
Yeah, there were some rude people.
We're very sorry.
Yeah, but that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right, see you next time.
Have a good one.
Happy New Year, everybody. That didn't sound good.
Yeah.
That was bad.
You can just do it again.
Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everybody. There it is.